Have you ever heard words so sharp, they don't just hurt, they cut right through your soul? I did, and it wasn't from a stranger. It was from my own son. That morning, I had come by his house quietly. I carried a basket of warm bread, the same kind he used to beg for as a boy. I thought maybe, just maybe, we could talk again. Maybe he'd finally forgive me for whatever I did wrong. But as I stood outside his kitchen door, I froze because I heard his voice, the same voice that once said, "I love you, Mama." Now cold and distant, he said, "Why is she even still alive?" I remember the sound of those words. They didn't echo, they sunk deep. I pressed my hand against the wall just to keep myself from falling. It wasn't anger I felt first. It was emptiness. Like all those years of love, sacrifice, sleepless nights, gone in a single sentence. And do you know the cruelest part? He didn't even whisper it. He said it so casually, like I was nothing more than an inconvenience that overstayed its welcome. I wanted to scream. I wanted to ask him why, but I didn't. I just stood there, hidden behind that thin wall, realizing that the boy I raised was gone. That night, I sat by the window with the lights off, holding that same bread, now cold, untouched. The house was too quiet, too heavy. I could hear the ticking of the clock, every second whispering, "You don't belong anymore." But here's the thing. When life breaks you like that, you only have two choices. You can let the hurt bury you, or you can rise and show the world why you're still here. So I made a choice. I didn't cry that night, not again. Instead, I started to remember who I was before I became just someone's mother, the woman who built her life with her own hands, who kept a family alive on nothing but faith and tea leaves. Because if my son couldn't see my worth anymore, then I was going to show him, not with anger, not with words, but with proof. And that, my dear, is where this story begins. Because sometimes the people who bury you forget you were the one who planted the seeds they're standing on. So stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. When you become a mother, you never imagine a day will come when your own child will look at you with resentment. You hold them in your arms, tiny and fragile, and you think, this one will always love me. You believe your sacrifices will be remembered, that every tear, every sleepless night, every prayer whispered at dawn will one day be understood. I used to believe that too. My son, Ryan, wasn't just my child. He was my whole reason for breathing. He came into my life after 2 miscarriages. When I held him for the first time, I promised I'd protect him from everything, even from life if I had to. His father, Daniel, was a kind man, but life doesn't always bless you with time. Ryan was only 9 when Daniel fell sick. We spent months in and out of hospitals, selling whatever we could to pay for treatments. I remember sleeping on metal chairs beside hospital beds, praying to God to let Daniel stay, even for a little longer. But he didn't. After Daniel's funeral, it was just the 2 of us, me and Ryan, facing a world that didn't have much mercy. We lived in a small rented house at the edge of town. It wasn't much, but it was ours. I worked double shifts at a local bakery, sometimes cleaning houses in the evenings. My hands were always tired, my knees always aching. But every time I came home and saw Ryan smile, I thought, it's worth it. He used to wait up for me, a blanket around his shoulders, a cup of tea already on the table. "Mom, you're late again," he'd say, pouting like his father used to. I'd laugh and tell him, "One day you'll understand." And he'd nod, like he did, though back then, I don't think he really could. We didn't have much, but I made sure he had everything he needed. New books for school, warm clothes in winter, a little toy car for his birthday. I even skipped meals some nights so he could eat better, but I never told him that. Ryan was smart, smarter than I ever was. He got a scholarship to college, something I still thank God for. I remember the day we packed his bags. He hugged me so tight I couldn't breathe, whispering, "Don't cry, Mom. I'll make you proud." And he did, for a while. He graduated with honors, got a good job in the city, met a beautiful girl named Amelia, and within a year, they were married. I remember feeling so proud watching him in that tuxedo, his eyes full of light. I thought, he did it. We did it.
Then one weekend, he came home, but he wasn't the same boy I raised. He looked at the old furniture like it was dirt. He frowned at my old-fashioned clothes, my small home. I caught him whispering to Amelia, "She refuses to move on. This place is stuck in the past." That night, when I offered them my bed and said I'd sleep on the couch, Amelia smiled and said, "No need, really. We're not staying long." It stung. I didn't say a word. I just nodded and made tea the way I always did. A few months later, Ryan called and said, "Mom, maybe you should think about selling the house. It's too big for you alone." I laughed. "Too big? Ryan, it's barely a 2-bedroom. He sighed. "You know what I mean. You could use that money to move into one of those senior apartments, closer to people your age." People my age, as if I was a child who needed supervision. Still, I stayed calm. "Ryan, this is my home. Your father built that kitchen counter with his hands. Every corner here holds a memory. I'm not ready to leave it." He was quiet for a second before saying, "You can't live off memories, Mom." That sentence, it hit me harder than I expected, because memories were all I had left. After that call, things just fell apart. He stopped visiting completely. If I called, he'd answer quickly, distracted, saying, "I'll call you back." But he rarely did. On holidays, it was always a message. "Sorry, Mom, we're busy." And I told myself I was fine. I told myself children grow up, they get busy. But deep down, I knew it wasn't just time pulling us apart. It was something else, something colder. Then one Sunday morning, I got a call from my neighbor, Mrs. Evans. She said she'd seen Ryan's car outside town. "I think he's moving into that big house on Maple Drive," she said. My heart leapt. I hadn't known he was moving back near me. So the next weekend, I baked his favorite bread, the honey wheat loaf, and went to see him. I wanted to surprise him, tell him I was proud, offer to help with the unpacking. Maybe that would bring us close again. But instead, that was the day I heard it. The day my son looked at me, not with love, but with the question, why is she even still alive? I stood behind the fence, frozen in place, my hands trembling, the bread box slipping from my grip. I heard Amelia's voice next, calm, dismissive, poisonous. "You know she'll never move on. She's just holding you back. You've done enough. Let her be." And he didn't argue. He didn't defend me. He just sighed and said, "You're right." That sigh, I swear I'll never forget it because it sounded like relief. I remember walking home that day under a gray sky. It wasn't raining, but it felt like it. Every step heavier than the last. My house looked smaller than ever. When I opened the door, the smell of bread and lavender hit me, but it didn't feel warm anymore. That night, I sat at my table, the bread untouched. I looked around at the walls lined with old photographs, Ryan's first day at school, his graduation, his wedding. I'd framed every milestone, and for the first time, I couldn't recognize the boy in those pictures. Was he ever really mine? Or was I just holding on to a version of him that no longer existed? I don't know when I started crying, but when I did, it wasn't the quiet kind. It was the kind that breaks something inside you. I cried for the little boy who once promised to take care of me. I cried for the woman I used to be. Strong, hopeful, certain that love could never turn cold. But in that storm of tears, something inside me shifted. Because in that silence, after the crying stopped, a small voice inside whispered, "Enough. Enough waiting. Enough apologizing. Enough letting them decide my worth. If my own son could forget who I was, then maybe it was time I reminded him and myself that I wasn't finished yet." That's when I made a promise. Not out loud, not written anywhere, just deep in my heart. I promised that before I left this world, my son would remember the kind of woman his mother truly was. Not a burden, not a ghost of the past, but a survivor. And from that moment, my story began again.
After that day, everything inside me went quiet. Not peaceful, quiet, the kind that aches, the kind that hums in your bones long after the noise is gone. For weeks, I moved through the house like a ghost. I'd wake up, make tea, sweep the floor, stare at the same window where I used to watch Ryan play in the yard. And every time I saw that empty space, I'd remember the sound of his voice saying those words, "Why is she even still alive?" I thought maybe time would dull it, but it didn't. It echoed everywhere. I stopped answering calls. I stopped baking. The house that once smelled like cinnamon and comfort now smelled like dust and silence. Sometimes I'd hear Daniel's voice in my head, soft and calm. "Don't lose yourself, Mary." But how could I not, when the one person I lived for made me feel like I shouldn't even exist anymore? Days turned into weeks, and weeks blurred into months. One morning, as I was watering my plants, I looked at my reflection in the window. My hair had turned more silver than gray, my eyes tired, my shoulders slouched. I barely recognized the woman looking back. And that's when something in me snapped, not in anger, but in clarity. I realized I had spent my entire life giving to my husband, to my son, to everyone who needed me, and I had forgotten myself. Who was I before I became Ryan's mother? Before I was the quiet widow people pitied in the grocery line? I didn't have the answer, but I was going to find it. So I started small. That afternoon, I went into the old attic, the one I hadn't stepped into in years. The air smelled of cedar and memories. I found boxes filled with things I'd packed away long ago. My old sketchbooks, my wedding veil, Ryan's baby clothes, and a dusty guitar I hadn't touched since before Daniel died. When I ran my fingers across those strings, the sound was rough, broken, but it was alive. And for the first time in years, I smiled. Every evening after that, I'd sit by the window, strumming gently, humming old songs I used to sing when Ryan was little. It wasn't much, but it felt like coming home to a part of me I'd lost. The next week, I joined a local book club. I hadn't been around people in so long I almost didn't go. But when I walked into that little library, full of chatter, coffee smell, and laughter, I felt something stir inside me. The women there were around my age, all with stories of their own, some widowed, some divorced, some lonely like me. We started meeting every Thursday. I listened at first, quietly, but then one day I shared my story. Not all of it, just a piece. The part about losing Daniel, about raising Ryan alone. They didn't pity me. They listened. They understood. And it felt good. It felt like breathing again. Around that time, I also started baking again, not because I had to, but because I wanted to.
I began delivering small batches of bread and cookies to the community center for the kids after school. At first, they didn't even know who was bringing them. But one day, a little girl caught me in the kitchen. She grinned, chocolate on her cheeks, and said, "Are you the cookie lady?" I laughed, a real laugh, and said, "Maybe I am." That small moment lit something in me. I hadn't realized how much joy I'd buried under years of sorrow. And suddenly, I just didn't want to exist. I wanted to live. So I began volunteering at the center, teaching kids how to bake. We'd laugh, spill flour everywhere, burn a few trays, and I didn't care. I'd go home smelling like sugar and joy. And word spread fast. Soon, everyone knew about the cookie lady. They started leaving little notes for me. "Thank you for making me smile. You remind me of my grandma. Can we bake again tomorrow?" I saved every single note. It was strange, how the love I had been begging from my son, I found in the laughter of strangers' children. But still, there were nights when I'd sit alone, tea in hand, and wonder, did Ryan ever think about me? Did he even miss me? Or was I truly erased from his world? Then one evening, I found out. I had gone to the grocery store, just picking up flour and milk, when I saw Ryan. He was standing at the checkout line, phone in hand, Amelia beside him. My heart stopped. I almost turned around, but before I could, he looked up. For a second, his eyes widened. Then, his expression changed. Polite, uncomfortable, almost guilty. "Mom," he said stiffly, "you're here?" I smiled faintly. "I live here, Ryan." "Still." He chuckled awkwardly, glancing at Amelia, who gave me a small, forced smile. "Right. Of course." I wanted to hug him. I wanted to ask him to come home, to just sit and talk like we used to, but I didn't. Instead, I looked at him, really looked. He looked tired, older. The shine in his eyes was dimmer. I said softly, "You look busy. I won't keep you." He nodded. "Yeah, things have been hectic." And then he did something that shattered me and healed me all at once. He said, "Take care of yourself, Mom." Simple words. Empty, maybe, but they meant something. Not because of what he said, but because of how I finally heard them. I smiled and said, "Don't worry, sweetheart. I've learned how." Then I walked away. Not broken, not begging, just free. That night, I sat by my window again, guitar in hand, tea beside me. And as I strummed softly, I realized something powerful. Maybe Ryan didn't need to understand my worth. Maybe no one did, because I already knew it now. The next morning, I started something new. I opened a small home bakery. I called it Still Here. The name made people curious, but for me, it was everything. It was my message to the world, and maybe to my son too. The first week, I sold only 3 loaves. The second, 10. By the third, people were lining up outside my gate, laughing, chatting, taking pictures with me. Soon, local newspapers caught wind. Local widow inspires town with her story and bread. When Ryan saw the article, I know he did. He didn't call, but he sent flowers. No note, just a card that said, "Proud of you." I stared at that card for a long time. I didn't cry this time. I just smiled. Because now I understood. Sometimes you don't need to fight for people to see you. You just need to stand up and keep living. Let your strength do the talking. And if they ever wonder why you're still alive, you show them. You show them by shining so bright they can't look away. When word spread about my bakery, still here, it wasn't fame I felt. It was purpose. For the first time in years, people didn't look at me with pity. They looked at me with admiration, warmth, and even better, respect. It's strange how life works, isn't it? Sometimes the very people who called you weak end up learning from your strength, even if they never say it out loud. Every morning, I'd open the door before sunrise. The smell of bread filled the air, cinnamon, honey, butter. Birds would start singing on the fence, and neighbors would stop by just to talk. My hands stayed busy, but my heart felt full. And then one day, everything changed again. It was a Thursday morning. The bell above the bakery door jingled, and when I looked up, I froze. Ryan was standing there. He looked older, paler. The confident man who once spoke down to me now stood silent, almost unsure of himself. I wiped my hands on my apron, my heart racing but steady. "Ryan," I said quietly. He gave a small nod. "Hi, Mom." For a second, neither of us moved. The air between us felt thick with years of unspoken words. Then he looked around the shop. His eyes fell on the shelves lined with fresh loaves, on the wall where I'd hung that framed article, "Still Here," the bakery that brought a town together. He smiled faintly. "You've been busy." I nodded. "I have. Keeps me out of trouble." He chuckled, but it was nervous. His eyes darted to the counter, where I'd kept a small jar labeled "for the kids' books." I donated a portion of every sale to buy storybooks for children at the community center. He stared at it for a while before saying softly, "I didn't know you were doing all this." I looked at him, really looked, and I saw something in his face I hadn't seen in years. Shame, regret, maybe even love, buried deep. "You didn't ask," I said gently. He winced, and for a moment he looked just like that little boy again, the one who used to hide behind my apron when strangers visited. "Mom," he started, but his voice cracked. He stopped, ran a hand through his hair, and sighed. "I don't even know where to start. I've been awful to you. I know that. I was, listening to the wrong people." I stayed quiet. Sometimes silence says more than any words could. He continued. "Amelia, she thought I needed to move forward, that you were holding me back. And I believed her. I looked down at the bread I was kneading. And do you still believe that?" He hesitated, then shook his head slowly. "No, not anymore. Not after seeing this. You're more alive than I've ever been." That sentence, it hit me deep. For years, I wanted him to just see me, to remember me. And now here he was, finally understanding. He walked around the small shop, touching the counters, the jars, the notes the children had written. "You built all this alone?" I smiled softly. "Not alone. God gave me hands and life gave me reason." He swallowed hard, eyes glistening. "I'm sorry, Mom." 3 words I'd waited a lifetime to hear, yet when they came, I didn't cry. I just stepped forward, reached out, and touched his cheek. "You were lost, Ryan. I know that feeling too well." He looked at me, tears finally breaking through.
You heard what I said that day, didn't you?
I nodded. I did. He covered his face with his hands. God, Mom, I can't believe I said that. I was angry, stressed, trying to prove myself. I thought success meant leaving the past behind. I didn't realize you were my past and my foundation. I said quietly, It hurt, Ryan, more than I can ever tell you. But if it hadn't happened, I might never have remembered who I am. He looked up surprised. Aren't you angry? I smiled, eyes soft. I was, but anger's heavy, son. You can't carry it and peace at the same time. I chose peace. He stood still for a moment, and then in a small, trembling voice, he whispered, Can I hug you? That broke me. All the walls, all the silence, all the years melted away in that moment. I opened my arms and he stepped into them, my grown son, shaking, crying, whispering, I'm sorry, over and over. And I held him, stroking his hair just like I did when he was little. Shh, it's all right. You're home. We stood there for what felt like forever. Mother and son, finally finding their way back through the mess of pride and pain. After that day, Ryan started visiting every week. At first, just to help around the shop. But soon he started talking, really talking. He'd sit on the counter, flour on his hands, and we'd laugh about old times. He even helped bake once, though his first loaf came out flat as a brick. We laughed till tears ran down our faces. One evening, he brought Amelia with him. I won't lie, I was nervous. But she walked in with a soft smile and a small bouquet of daisies. Mrs. Hayes, she said quietly, I owe you an apology. I raised a brow. For what, dear? She swallowed. For everything. I said things I shouldn't have. I thought I was helping Ryan grow, but I was only pulling him away from his roots. From you. I smiled faintly. It takes courage to say that.
She looked down, her eyes wet. You didn't deserve how we treated you. I placed a hand over hers. We all make mistakes. What matters is what we do after them. From that day on, things slowly changed. Not perfect, but better. Ryan started organizing charity bake sales for my shop. Amelia helped design flyers and handle the finances. We became a small team again, the family we were always meant to be. But more than that, I saw Ryan changing, truly changing. One afternoon, I caught him standing in front of that same apple tree in his backyard, the one where I'd overheard him that horrible day. He was staring at it quietly. I walked up beside him, and he said softly, You planted this, didn't you? I nodded. The day you were born. He smiled sadly. It's still standing, even after all those storms. I looked at him and said, Some roots go deep, Ryan. No matter how rough the storm, they hold on. He turned to me, eyes full of tears again, and whispered, You're talking about yourself, aren't you? I smiled gently. Maybe I am. That night, when I went home, I sat by my window again, watching the stars. I thought about everything, the pain, the loneliness, the rediscovery, and finally, forgiveness. And I realized something powerful. The people who break you often teach you the strength you never knew you had. Ryan didn't just wound me. He woke me up. He made me remember that I was never just a mother or a widow or an old woman waiting to fade. I was a fighter, a creator, a woman with a story worth telling.
The next morning, I baked something new, a special kind of bread shaped like a heart. I called it the second chance loaf. When customers asked about the name, I smiled and said, because sometimes life gives us another chance to make things right, if we're brave enough to take it. People loved it, and somehow word spread again. The local paper ran another story. Still Here Bakery launches Second Chance Bread, a symbol of forgiveness. When Ryan read it, he laughed and said, "You're becoming a celebrity, Mom." I winked and replied, "Maybe, but fame isn't what I wanted. This is." He looked around. At me, at Amelia helping customers, at the smiling faces in the shop, and nodded. Yeah, it's perfect. And maybe it was. Not because everything was fixed or easy, but because for the first time in a long, long time, my life was whole. The truth is, people think age steals your purpose. But they forget. Time doesn't erase your value. It only refines it. And sometimes it takes being broken to realize what was truly inside you all along. So if anyone ever asks me again, "Why are you still alive?" I'll smile and say, "Because I still have something to give." After Ryan and I found our peace, life didn't slow down. If anything, it grew louder. Not with chaos, but with laughter, footsteps, voices, and stories. My bakery, Still Here, became more than just a shop. It became a heartbeat for the forgotten. A quiet corner where broken souls found warmth, even if just for a few minutes, with a slice of bread and a listening ear. They came in all shapes and stories. Some brought pain, some brought hope, but every single one carried a piece of me within them. The first was Lena, a middle-aged woman with weary eyes and hands that trembled as she held her coffee cup. She'd been coming in for weeks, always sitting near the window, always alone. One morning, I noticed tears dripping onto her plate. I walked over, sat across from her, and asked softly, "What's hurting you, child?" She blinked at me startled, then sighed. "I lost my job and my husband left 2 months ago. I thought I'd be fine, but I can't even afford rent now. I don't know who I am anymore." I reached across and held her hand. "You're still you, dear. You're just in between chapters." She laughed through her tears. "That's easy to say when you're strong." I smiled. "Oh no, strength isn't something you're born with, Lena. It's something you grow into after breaking a few times." From that day, she started helping me around the bakery, first cleaning tables, then baking small batches. Within months, she had a spark again. She began experimenting with her own recipes, honey oat cookies, walnut muffins, and one day they sold out before noon. When I told her, she burst into tears again, but this time they were tears of joy. "People love what you made," I said. "You found yourself again." She hugged me tight and whispered, "No, Mrs. Hayes, you found me." And I thought, maybe that's what life's really about, not just surviving our own storms, but lighting candles for others lost in theirs. Then there was Mr. Collins, a retired postman. He came every Friday, always wearing his faded blue jacket, always ordering the same thing, a slice of apple pie and black coffee. He'd sit for hours, staring out the window like he was waiting for someone. One day, Curiosity got the best of me. I asked, "You waiting for someone, Mr. Collins?" He smiled faintly. "I guess I am. My wife, June. She used to love this spot. We'd come here every Friday before she passed. Now, I still come. Keeps her close, you know?" I nodded, my throat tight. Love like that never really leaves. It just changes shape. He chuckled softly. "Yeah, maybe she's sitting right here, mad that I didn't bring her flowers." We both laughed. After that, I started placing a small vase with daisies at his table every Friday. He never said it, but his smile told me it meant something. Weeks later, he brought a framed picture of June and placed it beside the vase. "Now it's perfect," he said. Sometimes healing doesn't come in grand gestures. Sometimes it's in a simple flower on an empty chair. Then came Nina, a young girl no older than 19. She walked in one stormy evening, soaked from the rain, eyes red from crying. She didn't say much, just asked for whatever's warm. When I brought her soup, she whispered, "Thank you," and stared at the floor. Something in her reminded me of myself years ago, sitting alone, thinking the world had moved on without me. After a while, she began opening up. She'd run away from home after her parents found out she'd dropped out of college. "They said I ruined my future," she muttered, voice shaking. "Maybe they're right." I poured her another bowl and said softly, "You can ruin plans, child, but you can't ruin purpose. That finds you again when you're ready." She blinked, unsure whether to cry or laugh. She stayed a while, first helping with dishes, then decorating the front counter. She had a gift for color, for beauty. Soon the bakery looked more alive than ever. Tiny painted signs, wildflowers on shelves, soft fairy lights around the windows. One morning, I found her sketching a logo, a loaf of bread with a heart inside it. She said, "It's you." She hugged me. "No, my dear, it's us. We're all still here." Months later, she reconciled with her parents. She told me she was going back to study design. "I'll come back one day to make your bakery famous." And she did. She redesigned my logo, printed new menus, and posted about me online. Within weeks, people from other towns started visiting. I realized then, love once shared multiplies quietly, like yeast in warm dough. One day, a local reporter came to interview me again. "Mrs. Hayes," she said, "people say Still Here isn't just a bakery, it's a healing place. What's your secret?" I smiled. "There's no secret, dear. I just give what I needed most: kindness, a little warmth, and a reason to stay." She nodded, eyes soft. "Your story inspired so many. We'd like to feature a few of the people you've helped." So we did. When the article came out, it wasn't titled about me this time. It read, "The Bakery That Rebuilt Broken Lives." There were pictures of Lena, smiling in her apron, Mr. Collins beside his daisies, Nina with her sketchbook, and at the very end, a picture of me holding a tray of bread shaped like hearts, the second chance loaves. I cried when I saw it, not because of pride, but because I realized my pain had bloomed into something beautiful. Every scar had become someone else's starting point. But there was one story that shook me most. Mary, a woman who came in one afternoon holding a crumpled newspaper. She placed it on the counter and whispered, "You don't know me, but your story saved me." I frowned, confused. "How's that, dear?" She pointed to the article. "I read about you, about how your son said those words, how you built a life anyway. I was going to end mine that night, but then I thought,
If you could still bake love after all that pain, maybe I could still breathe through mine. I froze. Tears burned my eyes as I reached for her hand. You're here. That means you chose life. I'm so proud of you. She smiled, trembling. I didn't just choose life. I chose to start over. I opened a small candle shop last week. I call it Still Burning. I laughed and cried at the same time. That's beautiful. She whispered, I learned from the best. After she left, I locked the door for a moment and sat in silence. The weight of it all hit me. How a single moment of cruelty could have destroyed me. But instead, it became the spark that lit 1,000 candles. That's when I understood. Pain doesn't have to end you. Sometimes it begins you. These people, Lena, Mr. Collins, Nina, Mary, they didn't just walk into my bakery. They walked into my story. And in doing so, they helped me rewrite it. Each of them carried a reminder that we are all connected by invisible threads of grief, love, forgiveness, and hope. You never know whose soul your strength is keeping alive. Now, when I open my bakery each morning, I look at the sign that hangs above the door. Still here, a place to begin again. And I whisper a quiet thank you to the son who broke me, the strangers who healed me, and the woman I became because I refused to stay silent. Sometimes when I hand a loaf to a customer, I see the same tired eyes I once had, and I tell them softly, take this. It's more than bread. It's proof that you can start over. Because at the end of the day, that's all any of us really need. Someone to remind us that we're still here and that being here is enough. It's funny how the future doesn't always come with fireworks or grand beginnings. Sometimes it comes quietly, like a sunrise through the kitchen curtains. That's how it happened for me. Not in a single day, but in slow, steady moments, each one whispering, you made it. I used to think the future was something that belonged to the young, that once you reached a certain age, your story became a collection of yesterdays. But I was wrong. The truth is, the future belongs to those who decide to keep living, even after the world forgets them. And that's what I did. I decided. Every morning, I still wake up before dawn. I knead dough while the sky is still dark, and I whisper a small prayer, not for what's ahead, but for what's already here. I thank God for breath, for the sound of laughter echoing in my bakery, for the scent of cinnamon and coffee that fills the air, and for the faces that walk through my door. Faces that remind me how fragile and beautiful life can be. But there's something deeper that grew in me after all that happened, a kind of wisdom I never knew I carried, the kind that only comes when you've been broken and remade a few times. You see, pain doesn't just teach you survival, it teaches you vision. It teaches you to see people beyond their masks, to recognize silence as sorrow, to hear pain and laughter. It gives you the kind of heart that no longer judges, only understands. And that understanding became my silent superpower. When people come into my bakery now, I don't just see customers. I see stories. The man buying bread for his sick wife, he's terrified of losing her, but he doesn't know how to say it. The young mother counting coins before ordering coffee, she reminds me of myself,
years ago, trying to make ends meet but still smiling for her child. The teenagers laughing too loudly, they're not rude. They're just afraid of being unheard. Every face carries a storm, and sometimes all they need is shelter.
That's what Still Here became, a shelter. Not just from the cold, but from the loneliness that eats people alive. And maybe that's what I was always meant to build. Not just a bakery, but a place where broken hearts rise again. One evening, as I was closing up, I found Ryan standing at the door. It had been weeks since his last visit. He looked tired, but softer somehow. He held something in his hands, a small box wrapped in brown paper. "I made this for you," he said, awkwardly, like a boy again. Inside was a silver locket engraved with the words, "Still Here." I looked at him, speechless. He said quietly, "Every time I pass by your bakery, I see how many people you've helped. You didn't just prove you were alive, Mom. You proved that you were the reason others still are." Tears filled my eyes. "Oh, Ryan." He smiled, a little broken, a little healed. He said, "I guess I just needed to grow up to understand how strong you've always been." I hugged him, and for the first time in years, it felt easy. No bitterness, no blame, just two hearts learning to love each other again. And in that moment, I realized something important. Forgiveness isn't a gift you give to the other person. It's one you give to yourself. Because when you let go of the pain, you make space for peace. After that day, life felt lighter. The air itself seemed softer, the light warmer. I began speaking at community centers, small gatherings of women who'd been abandoned, ignored, or silenced. They called it the Still Here Circle. We'd sit together with tea and tell our stories, raw, unpolished, unfiltered. Some cried, some laughed, some sat silent, just listening. But every single one left a little taller than they came. And I always ended the sessions the same way. Don't wait for someone to see your worth, my dears. Show them. Not by shouting, but by shining. Quietly. Consistently. Until your existence itself becomes undeniable. The women would nod, and sometimes they'd hug me before leaving, whispering, "Thank you." But I'd always smile and say, "Don't thank me. Thank the woman you're becoming." One day, a young reporter asked me, "Miss Hayes, after everything you've gone through, the betrayal, the heartbreak, the rebuilding, what do you think is the meaning of it all?" I thought about it for a moment and said, "Maybe the meaning isn't to find answers. Maybe it's to learn how to live without them and still choose kindness anyway." She blinked, surprised. "That's beautiful." I smiled. "It's the truth. You can't control what people do to you, but you can control what grows from it." She wrote that down in her little notebook. I didn't know then that it would become the most shared quote from her article. People started coming from far away, saying they read my words and wanted to meet the woman who turned heartbreak into a home. But I don't see myself that way. I'm not a saint. I'm just a mother who survived her own child's cruelty and still found the strength to love again. That's the real miracle, not the bakery, not the success, not the articles.
The miracle is that my heart still beats soft instead of bitter. Sometimes I sit by the window at dusk, the same spot I once sat crying in. The light falls golden across the floorboards, and I can almost see my younger self there, trembling, lost, holding that cold loaf of bread she baked for a son who no longer cared. I want to reach across time and tell her, you won't just survive this. You'll become because of it. Because here's the truth no one tells you. The people who try to bury you don't realize you're a seed.
You'll grow again. You'll rise, bloom, feed others, and one day you'll be the reason someone else keeps going. And that, to me, is the most sacred thing a life can be. So when people ask me now, what's next for you, Mrs. Hayes? I smile. Because my answer is simple. More living. I don't need grand plans. I don't need apologies that never came. I don't need to prove anything anymore. I just need mornings filled with laughter, evenings filled with gratitude, and a heart that still believes in second chances. I want to see Still Here grow, not as a bakery, but as a message. A reminder that no matter what life takes from you, it can never take your purpose unless you hand it over. And I won't. Not now. Not ever. Because I heard my son say, why is she even still alive? And my answer is simple. Because I still have stories to tell. Because I still have hands to bake, words to speak, hearts to heal. Because I'm not done. I am still here. And for as long as I breathe, I will keep showing the world exactly why. There's something I've learned through all of this, something no book or preacher ever taught me. Pain doesn't end you, it reveals you. When I first heard my son say those words, why is she even still alive? I thought my world had ended. I thought there was no coming back from that kind of heartbreak. But life, my dear, has a way of proving us wrong. Because when you're broken down to nothing, that's when your truth begins to bloom. That's when you remember who you really are. Beneath all the roles, mother, wife, caretaker, forgotten soul, you're still you, still breathing, still worthy, still here. And maybe that's what living really means. Not chasing perfection, not clinging to the past, but standing in your pain and saying, I'm still standing. I look around my bakery now, the one I built with trembling hands and tired bones, and I see more than bread and sugar. I see the proof of survival. I see the laughter of people who once forgot how to smile. I see myself reflected in every woman who walks through those doors, carrying her own invisible weight, but still choosing to show up. And I realize this was never just about me proving something to my son. It was about proving something to myself. That I didn't need anyone's permission to exist. That I didn't need anyone's validation to matter. That even when the world says you're done, you can whisper back, not yet. Sometimes I still hear his words echo in my memory, but they don't hurt anymore. Now when I remember them, I smile softly and think, that was the day I woke up. The day I stopped asking, why did he say that? And started asking, what will I do with it? Because it's not what they say about you that defines you. It's what you do after they say it. And if you're listening to me right now, maybe you've been where I was. Maybe someone you loved broke you. Maybe you feel invisible, forgotten, discarded. Maybe you've been told you don't matter anymore. But hear me, my dear, you do. You matter more than you'll ever know. If you still have breath in your lungs, if you can still cry, still laugh, still feel, then there's still a purpose for you here. You're not too old, you're not too late, you're not too broken. Your story isn't over just because someone stopped reading it. You can still turn the page. And when you do, you'll find that there's strength waiting inside you that you didn't know existed. The kind that doesn't need applause. The kind that doesn't fade. The kind that quietly whispers, I survived. You know, people often tell me, Mrs. Hayes, your story gives me hope. And I tell them the same thing every time. Don't just find hope in my story, find it in your own. Because every one of us has a still here moment. That day you thought it was the end, but somehow you kept going. Remember that moment. Honor it, because that's where your power lives. And if my story did anything tonight, I hope it reminded you of that you too can rise again. If you felt something while listening, if it reminded you of your own quiet strength, then I want you to do one thing for me right now. Pause for a second, take a deep breath, and whisper to yourself, I'm still here. Say it like a promise, because it is one. You made it through everything you thought you couldn't, and that deserves to be seen. And before you go, I want to leave you with this. Don't let bitterness steal your story. Don't let pain make you silent. And don't ever let someone else decide when your life stops having meaning. Because sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't anger or shouting or proving them wrong. It's simply surviving beautifully, living with grace, smiling anyway, loving anyway, and showing up for yourself even when no one else does. That's real strength. That's what it means to be still here. If this story touched your heart, my dear, then don't forget to share it with someone who might need it tonight. Because you never know. Your share might be the reason someone else decides to stay. And if you want to hear more stories like this, real stories from real hearts, make sure to subscribe to Grandma's Silent Truths. Like this video and tell me your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them, and each one reminds me why I keep telling these stories. Don't miss the next one, because next time I'll be sharing a story that proves sometimes the people who break you are the ones who end up saving you. Until then, take care of your heart, and remember, you are still here, and that's enough.